There's a moment in every person's life when the noise becomes unbearable. The phone buzzes, the emails pile up, expectations crush your chest like invisible weights, and suddenly, your mind begins to tremble under the pressure. You try to appear calm, composed, even confident, but deep inside, a storm is raging. You feel it. That burning pulse in your chest, that whisper in your head saying, "You can't handle this." But what if that voice was wrong? What if, no matter the chaos around you, you could remain unshaken, calm as stone, unmoved as the mountain, clear as still water? That's not fantasy. It's something the Stoics mastered centuries ago, and something that modern science is only now beginning to understand. Most people believe calmness is something that happens after things go right, that once the problems disappear, peace will follow. But the Stoics saw it differently. They believed calmness isn't the result of control, it is control. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He didn't write that as a quote to inspire others. He wrote it to himself, to survive. Imagine the emperor of Rome, surrounded by war, betrayal, and death, whispering those words not as philosophy, but as a lifeline. Because the truth is, pressure doesn't destroy people, panic does. And here's the question most of us never ask. Why do some people collapse under stress while others become sharper, more focused, almost serene? What makes one person explode and another breathe deeply and act with precision? Neuroscience calls it emotional regulation. Psychology calls it cognitive reframing. But the Stoics called it something far simpler: mastery of the self. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That line wasn't poetry, it was a diagnosis of the mind's most destructive habit. And the more you understand this, the more you realize the chaos isn't out there, it's in here. Think about the last time you felt completely overwhelmed. Maybe it was during an argument, a financial loss, or when everything seemed to fall apart all at once. You told yourself you couldn't handle it, that you were breaking. But you didn't break. You're still here. And if you look closely, you'll see every storm you've ever survived taught you something hidden. The Stoics believed that within every moment of suffering lies a choice. Not to control what happens, but to control who you become because of it. And maybe, just maybe, the reason you're here watching this isn't by accident. Maybe life has been testing you, preparing you to understand something that most people never will: how to remain calm under any pressure. But calmness doesn't come from motivational quotes or deep breathing alone. It comes from understanding a few timeless rules that the ancient Stoics lived by when the world tried to crush them, rules that modern science now validates as the foundation of mental resilience. These are not theories, they are weapons, invisible shields against panic, fear, and emotional collapse. But before we uncover them, there's something you must first understand. These rules are useless if you're not ready to face yourself, because calmness under pressure isn't learned, it's earned, one painful moment at a time. So, let me ask you, what if everything you thought about control, stress, and strength was backward? What if the very way you try to calm down is the reason you never do? The Stoics discovered something that flips the modern idea of peace on its head, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. But we'll get to that. For now, remember this: calmness is not the absence of storms, it's the ability to stand within them and smile. Because somewhere, hidden beneath all your anxiety, beneath all your pressure, lies a version of you that cannot be shaken. And in the next few minutes, you're going to meet that version. The one who walks through chaos with unbreakable clarity. The one who doesn't just survive stress, but transforms it into power. The one who lives by 5 timeless rules that few will ever understand, but those who do
become unshakable.
Imagine standing on the marble balcony of the Roman palace at dawn. Below, the city still sleeps. Silent streets, scattered fires, the faint echo of distant soldiers changing guard. The emperor stands alone, watching the first light break over the horizon. His name is Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the most powerful empire in history, but also, perhaps, its most exhausted. The year is 170 AD. Rome is collapsing under plague, war, and betrayal. Friends have turned into enemies. The Senate whispers behind his back. His generals question his strength, and his own body is failing him. Fever, pain, and nights without sleep. Yet in his private notes, the words that would one day become meditations, he writes not of despair, but of discipline. If you were distressed by anything external, he reminds himself, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. He doesn't write those words to look wise. He writes them because in that moment, he is trying not to fall apart. The weight of the empire rests on his shoulders, yet the war that matters most is happening inside his mind. The same war you and I fight every day when everything seems to be falling apart. Because pressure is democratic. It doesn't care if you're an emperor or an employee. It comes for everyone. And the Stoics understood this better than anyone. Centuries before Marcus, a man named Epictetus was born a slave in the Roman Empire. He had no wealth, no freedom, no status. Yet his name would echo through history. He was beaten, humiliated, and mocked, but he refused to break. When his master twisted his leg until it snapped, Epictetus calmly said, "You will break it." And when it did, he only added, "I told you so." Later, he would teach students that no one can harm your mind unless you hand them the key. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Those words, forged in pain, became a weapon of freedom stronger than any sword. Now, pause and think. Two men, worlds apart, one born into chains, the other born into a throne. But both came to the same truth, that calmness is not born from comfort, but from clarity. Marcus had everything to lose. Epictetus had nothing to lose. But both realized the same thing. Peace cannot be taken, only surrendered. And that's where Stoicism becomes more than philosophy. It becomes survival. Seneca, another Stoic, wrote letters during a time when his own student, Emperor Nero, would later order him to take his own life. Imagine that, mentoring the man who would one day sign your death. And yet Seneca's writings in those years are filled not with bitterness, but with perspective. No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. He understood what we still struggle to accept. Pressure isn't your enemy, it's your mirror. It shows you what's left to master. Modern life may look different. The battles are digital, the empires are corporate, and the wars are fought in our own minds. But the essence hasn't changed. The Stoics faced death, exile, and betrayal. We face burnout, anxiety, and self-doubt. Different weapons, same enemy. The chaos within. And that's why their wisdom feels more alive today than ever. But here's the irony. In our quest for calm, we've built a world that makes calm impossible. We chase peace through distraction, scrolling, escaping, numbing, but never through understanding. The Stoics did the opposite. They sat inside the storm until it revealed its secret. And that secret, that precise shift in how they saw reality, is the foundation of the 5 rules we'll uncover later. These rules weren't just written by philosophers. They were tested by men who stood between life and death and still managed to smile. So before we even approach the first rule, we have to understand this. Calmness is not a gift, it's a discipline. It's the invisible thread connecting Marcus, Seneca, and Epictetus across centuries, and it's the same thread connecting you to them now. The question is, will you learn to hold it, or will you let the pressure pull you away? Because soon we'll uncover what they all knew, but never said directly. A method so simple, it will feel like remembering something you already knew. But not yet. For now, look closer at these men. One led armies. One served a tyrant. One was born in chains. And yet all three became free, not by escaping pressure, but by transforming it. That's the ancient paradox of Stoicism. To become calm under any pressure, you must first learn to stop running from it.
Fast forward 2,000 years, the marble palaces have turned into glass offices. The armies have become corporations. The battles are fought not with swords, but with deadlines, expectations, and invisible wars inside the mind. The modern human, just like the Roman emperor, wakes up to the sound of war, not trumpets, but alarms. Before the sun even rises, the mind is already under siege. Notifications, decisions, comparisons. The day hasn't even begun, and yet the war has. We think of pressure as something that arrives with big events, arguments, crises, disasters. But the truth is, pressure is now woven into the fabric of our everyday lives. The phone in your hand isn't just a tool, it's a weapon against your peace. We've become a civilization of anxious achievers, always connected, yet always restless. The Stoics would look at us and wonder, how did a species with so much comfort end up with so little calm? Epictetus lost everything he owned, yet was free. We own everything we want, yet remain enslaved, not by others, but by our own reactions. Seneca warned about this centuries ago when he wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." He wasn't just talking about money, he was talking about peace. Because the more we chase the feeling of control, the more it slips through our fingers. Pressure today wears a different mask. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It tells you you're behind. It tells you everyone else is winning. It convinces you that calm is something you'll earn after you succeed, after the promotion, after the perfect body, after the validation. But that illusion is the trap. And it's the same trap Marcus Aurelius wrote about when he said, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do." The world outside keeps shifting, algorithms, opinions, crises, but the only battle that ever mattered still happens inside. Psychologists today describe something called the amygdala hijack, when your emotional brain overrides your rational mind under stress. Your heart races, your vision narrows, your body floods with cortisol. You say things you don't mean, make decisions you later regret, and then wonder why you can't stay calm. But what's fascinating is that neuroscience is finally confirming what the Stoics understood millennia ago, that emotional control isn't about suppressing feelings, but mastering perception. What you believe about pressure changes how your body responds to it. If you see it as a threat, you panic. If you see it as a test, you grow. And that's exactly where Stoicism becomes revolutionary. It wasn't created for monks meditating in mountains. It was designed for soldiers, politicians, merchants, and slaves. For people in the arena, bleeding, struggling, breaking, but choosing not to break inside. They didn't aim to eliminate emotion, they aimed to transform it into strength. Marcus didn't avoid fear, he redefined it. Epictetus didn't deny pain, he mastered his response to it. And Seneca didn't run from death, he practiced for it. They trained the mind like a muscle because they understood that peace is not a state, it's a skill. And yet most people today train everything except that. We build our bodies, our careers, our images, but we neglect the one thing that determines how we experience all of it, our mind. We scroll for motivation, but avoid meditation. We chase new hacks, but ignore ancient truths. The Stoics would tell us that's why we suffer, because we seek calmness as if it's hiding somewhere else, when in fact it's been within us all along, buried under layers of noise. But here's where the story gets interesting, and this is the part few people ever realize. The Stoics weren't born calm, they became calm, through discipline, through failure, through moments that shattered their egos but shaped their character. And the same process exists today, hidden in plain sight. There are 5 ancient rules, precise mental disciplines that make this transformation not just possible, but inevitable. Each one addresses a different battlefield of the mind. Each one dismantles a lie you've been told about pressure, emotion, and control. But we can't open that door yet, not until you understand what truly causes the chaos. Because if you misdiagnose the problem, you'll chase the wrong cure. The Stoics didn't look for calm in comfort, they found it in confrontation. They faced themselves so deeply that nothing the world threw at them could touch the center of their being. That center, that unshakable stillness, exists in you too. The question is, can you find it before the world distracts you from it again? Because soon, we'll begin uncovering the rules, but before we do, you must see what's really standing between you and calm. It's not your circumstances, it's not other people, it's not even the pressure. It's something much closer and far more dangerous.
The Stoics had a word for it, pithei. It meant not just emotion, but emotion ungoverned, emotion that rules you instead of serving you. And that's where calmness begins to crumble. Not when life gets hard, but when you forget who's in command. Most people think chaos is something that happens to them. But the Stoics knew the most dangerous storms are the ones we build in our own minds. You've felt it, haven't you? That tightening in your chest before a conversation that hasn't even happened? The dread before a deadline that's still a week away? The anger that lingers long after the argument ended? These moments reveal the truth. Pressure doesn't break you. Your mind's story about pressure does. Epictetus used to tell his students, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. Centuries later, psychologists like Albert Ellis and Aaron Beck built entire branches of therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, based on that single Stoic insight. The human brain doesn't respond to reality, it responds to perception. You don't react to what's happening, you react to what you think is happening. And once that distinction sinks in, something inside you shifts forever. Because if your perception can imprison you, it can also set you free. Think of it like this. 2 people lose their job. One collapses into despair, convinced their life is over. The other sees it as a chance to rebuild, to start something new. Same event, different stories, different lives. Marcus Aurelius faced constant loss, betrayal, and illness. Yet in Meditations he wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." He turns suffering into fuel. What if you could do the same? What if every pressure you face was secretly a test, not of strength, but of perception? But here's the paradox. The moment you try to control your emotions, you often lose control faster. Why? Because suppression is not mastery. You can't silence the mind with force. The Stoics never taught emotional numbness. They taught awareness. They taught the art of stepping back, seeing the emotion, naming it, and asking, is this under my control or not? That question, so simple, so quiet, has saved lives, empires, and souls. It's the difference between drowning in your feelings and learning to float above them. Modern neuroscience confirms this too. When you observe an emotion instead of fighting it, activity in the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, decreases. The frontal cortex, your rational control center, takes over. In that instant, calm isn't something you wait for, it's something you create. Marcus Aurelius didn't have brain scans, but he understood the mechanism perfectly.
He practiced it every night, journaling his thoughts, examining his reactions, separating what was real from what was imagined. It was his ritual of clarity, a nightly battle for the throne of his mind. Now look at your own life. How many times have you been ruled by something that wasn't even real? The email that felt like an attack but wasn't. The silence from someone you love that must mean rejection. The momentary mistake that proves you're a failure. The mind doesn't just experience reality, it interprets it through fear, memory, and bias. And unless you train it, it becomes your worst storyteller. That's why the Stoics called philosophy a kind of therapy. It wasn't about sounding wise, it was about staying sane. But here's where things get even deeper. The Stoics believed there's a gap, a sacred pause, between stimulus and response. In that space lies your entire freedom. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the concentration camps, later echoed this same truth. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That's not coincidence. It's Stoicism reborn in modern form. And that gap, that moment of choice, is where calm lives. Yet most people never enter that space. They live as slaves to reaction, dragged by every emotion like prisoners tied to wild horses. You can see it everywhere, in traffic, in arguments, in comment sections online. Everyone reacting, no one reflecting. The Stoics trained for the opposite. They slowed down. They examined. They chose. And that choice made them untouchable. You may be wondering, how can someone actually live like that? Calm under fire, composed while others panic? It sounds almost superhuman. But it's not. It's trained step by step, using ancient principles that rewire how you perceive, process, and perform under stress. Those are the same 5 rules we'll soon uncover. But before we go there, you must grasp one final truth. If perception shapes pressure, then identity shapes perception. Who you believe you are determines how you face what happens. And that's the next layer of mastery, the point where philosophy meets self-image, and calm becomes identity, not effort.
The Stoics had another enemy, quieter than anger, subtler than fear, but infinitely more dangerous: the ego. The ego is the invisible hand behind almost every reaction we regret. It's the fragile voice inside that says, "They disrespected me. They don't appreciate me. I shouldn't have to deal with this." It takes every challenge personally. And when life presses against that fragile sense of self, calmness shatters. Pressure becomes unbearable, not because of what happens, but because it threatens who we think we are. Marcus Aurelius knew this battle intimately. In Meditations, he reminded himself, "Soon you will have forgotten all things, and all things will have forgotten you." It wasn't cynicism, it was liberation. He was reminding himself that his titles, his achievements, his legacy, all were illusions compared to the only thing that mattered: his character in this present moment. Because ego is what turns discomfort into suffering. It's the part of you that demands control, validation, and recognition. The Stoics called it the false self, the mask that trembles whenever reality doesn't go your way. Modern psychology confirms this with brutal precision. The ego interprets any loss, rejection, or uncertainty as death. Not physical death, but the death of identity. That's why criticism stings, why being ignored hurts, why failure feels unbearable. The brain registers these moments as existential threats. But the Stoics dismantled this illusion long before neuroscience could explain it. They practiced something radical: the art of self-forgetting. Seneca wrote, "He who fears death will never do anything worthy of a living man." Replace death with ego death, and the message is timeless. When you stop clinging to the idea of who you should be, pressure loses its power.
Think about it. How much of your stress comes not from what's happening, but from the story you tell yourself about what it means for your image? When someone cuts you off in traffic, it's not the delay that angers you, it's the feeling of being disrespected. When a project fails, it's not the setback that breaks you, it's the identity crisis. What will people think of me now? The Stoics saw through this illusion completely. They realized calmness begins the moment you no longer need the world to confirm your worth. Epictetus, born a slave, understood this better than anyone. He was mocked, beaten, dismissed. Yet he said, when someone provokes you, know that it is your opinion that has provoked you. He meant that no insult has meaning until you assign it one. The moment you stop defending your ego, you become untouchable. That's not weakness. That's power. It's what modern psychologists call detachment from ego identity. The Stoics called it freedom. And here's where most people misunderstand Stoicism. They think it's about being emotionless or robotic, but it's the opposite. It's about being so secure in who you are that nothing external can shake it. It's about realizing that you can lose everything, your job, your reputation, your possessions, and still remain whole. Because your value doesn't come from what changes, it comes from what doesn't. Seneca called it constantia, constancy of the soul. The world could spin in chaos, but the Stoic remained centered, like a still compass pointing to truth. Ego, on the other hand, makes everything personal. It takes the neutral and paints it as an attack. It turns every challenge into humiliation. It lives in a constant state of threat detection, scanning for disrespect, for comparison, for proof of worth. And every time you take the bait, you trade peace for performance. The Stoics refused to play that game. They trained themselves to see insults as information, not injury. Marcus wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." He was describing a mental fortress, an internal stance so solid that no insult could penetrate it. But there's something deeper here, a connection the Stoics hinted at but never fully explained. When the ego dissolves, something extraordinary happens. You stop reacting from fear and start responding from wisdom. Your perception clears, your decisions sharpen, and calm becomes your natural state, not something you fight for. Modern neuroscience might call it prefrontal dominance, the mind's higher reasoning taking command over emotional chaos. But to the Stoics, it was simpler. The return to nature, to reason, to harmony with reality. Still, the question remains, how did they train for this? How did they transform ego into clarity, panic into power, and pressure into peace? That's where their secret system begins, the 5 rules that we'll soon unveil. But before we do, there's one final illusion to confront, the one that traps even the strongest minds. Because you can master perception and ego and still crumble when life delivers the unexpected. The Stoics had a word for this too, fatum, fate. And it's in understanding fate that calmness reaches its highest form.
There is a moment every Stoic faced, a moment that separates theory from truth. It's when life refuses to listen, when all the wisdom you've gathered, all the control you've built, collapses under something you cannot change. The Stoics called it fatum, fate, that invisible thread that weaves through every choice, every loss, every victory, binding them together in a pattern we rarely understand until it's too late. For Marcus Aurelius, fate arrived not as a concept, but as heartbreak. He buried 8 of his own children. Imagine the emperor of the world standing over the small bodies of his own blood, powerless. No philosophy could save him from that pain. Yet in Meditations he wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." That's not a man escaping reality. That's a man standing inside of it and refusing to let it break him. Seneca, too, met fate face to face. When Nero, his former student, turned tyrant and ordered his death, Seneca didn't plead, didn't run, didn't curse the gods. He simply asked for a blade, cut his veins, and spoke calmly with his friends as he died. "What need is there to weep over parts of life?" he said. "The whole of it calls for tears." And yet his tone was not bitter. It was serene. His death became his final lesson, that calmness is not born when life cooperates. It's born when you stop demanding that it should. But perhaps the most haunting example is that of Epictetus, the man who began life as property, as someone else's possession. For years, his master decided when he ate, when he spoke, whether he was punished or praised. And yet, Epictetus wrote as a free man long before he was legally freed. "I must die. Must I then die lamenting? I must be put in chains. Must I then also lament? I must go into exile. Does anyone hinder me from going with a smile?" He didn't just accept fate, he transcended it. To him, fate was not an enemy, but a teacher that stripped away illusion until only truth remained. Modern psychology now calls this radical acceptance. It's the understanding that suffering multiplies when we resist what is unchangeable. The Stoics knew this instinctively. They practiced a mental exercise called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Every morning, they imagined the worst that could happen: loss, failure, betrayal, death. Not to invite misery, but to prepare the mind. Because when you've already looked fate in the eye, nothing can shock you. Marcus wrote, "Begin each day by telling yourself, 'Today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness.'" He didn't say it with despair, he said it with readiness. Fate cannot defeat the prepared. Now picture a modern version of this. A surgeon scrubbing in for a high-stakes operation, knowing that no matter how skilled she is, the outcome isn't fully in her control. A firefighter walking into a burning building. A single parent watching their child struggle in ways they can't fix. These are not ancient emperors, yet their battles are just as noble. The Stoic teachings live through them, every act of courage, every quiet moment of surrender that says, "I will do what I can, and I will accept what I must." But fate isn't always tragic. Sometimes it's disguised as delay, rejection, or redirection. How many times have you looked back at something that once shattered you and realized it saved you? The Stoics saw this pattern everywhere. They believed that life's apparent cruelty often conceals a deeper order, a divine reason too vast for the mind to grasp. To them, calmness came from aligning with that order, trusting that even chaos had intelligence. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, learned this firsthand. Shipwrecked and stripped of everything he owned, he wandered into Athens with nothing but the clothes on his back. Instead of collapsing, he found a small bookstore, read the works of Socrates, and began the journey that would change history. Years later, he said, "I made a prosperous voyage when I suffered shipwreck." The very disaster that ruined his life became the reason his philosophy was born. That's the paradox. What we call misfortune, the Stoics called initiation. Every hardship was a passage toward wisdom. Every loss a chance to practice virtue. Calm under pressure wasn't their goal, it was their proof. Because calmness isn't apathy, it's understanding. It's looking directly at fate, the loss, the uncertainty, the fear, and saying, "You cannot touch who I am inside." But this is where most of us falter. We confuse surrender with weakness,
We think acceptance means giving up. But to the Stoics, acceptance was the highest form of strength. It meant seeing clearly, without distortion. And only when you can see clearly can you act effectively. The mind that resists reality cannot think, it can only react. That's why calmness and wisdom are inseparable. You cannot be wise if you're at war with what is. And yet, there's a deeper layer still, a hidden practice the Stoics used to cultivate this acceptance, to train the mind to meet fate without fear. It wasn't just journaling or reflection. It was something internal, a ritual of perception and response that rewired their emotions from the inside out. That practice became the foundation of the first Stoic rule, the one we're drawing closer to, the one that transforms pressure into clarity. But before we unveil it, we need to step into the next realm, the battlefield of control, where most people lose their peace without realizing it. Because fate teaches acceptance, control teaches surrender. And the Stoics mastered both.
Control. It's the quiet addiction of every human being. The invisible thread we cling to when everything feels like it's slipping away. We try to control people, outcomes, opinions, even time itself. And the tighter we hold, the more life cuts through our hands. The Stoics saw this long before psychology gave it a name. They understood that most human suffering doesn't come from what happens to us, but from our desperate attempt to rewrite what already is. Marcus Aurelius, in the dim candlelight of his war tent, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He didn't write it as a philosopher giving advice to others. He wrote it as a man at war with himself. Imagine his nights, the empire stretched thin, plague spreading, betrayal whispering in the dark. Every decision he made could mean the life or death of thousands. Yet, in that chaos, he didn't try to control the storm. He anchored himself within it. That was his empire, not Rome, but his mind. And maybe that's the first lesson the Stoics tried to teach the modern world. You don't conquer chaos by fighting it. You conquer it by mastering the only territory you truly own. Seneca explained it differently. He said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." How many times have you destroyed your peace rehearsing disasters that never happened? You build mental prisons with keys you already hold. The Stoics knew that anxiety is not a product of pressure, it's a byproduct of misdirected control. You think you can predict what will happen, but you can't. You think you can manage what others think of you, but you can't. You think you can avoid pain forever, but you can't. And when the illusion breaks, so does your calm. Modern neuroscience now echoes this ancient truth. Studies on stress show that uncertainty, not pain, not loss, is the most stressful human experience. When the brain can't predict what's next, it panics. It floods your system with cortisol, hijacks your rational mind, and drives you into fight or flight. But the Stoics trained their minds to reverse this reflex. They replaced panic with preparation, chaos with clarity. Their mantra was simple: focus on what you can control, let go of what you can't. But living that truth, that is the real war. Take Epictetus again, the slave who became a sage. His master once twisted his leg until it broke, and Epictetus, in agony, said calmly, "You will break it." And when it snapped, he added, "Did I not tell you?" Not because he didn't feel pain, but because he refused to lose control of himself. His master could own his body, but not his reaction. That was the essence of Stoic calm, not the absence of pain, but the presence of choice. The Stoics built their peace like warriors build armor. Every thought was forged through the fire of awareness. They examined their reactions, their impulses, their expectations, until emotion no longer ruled them. Marcus wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Those words are 2,000 years old, yet every anxious person alive today could write them on their mirror, because pressure doesn't destroy calm. Perception does. Now, let's bring this to our world. You're stuck in traffic, late for a meeting. The clock ticks louder, your heartbeat rises, frustration builds. Nothing about the situation is truly dangerous, but your mind treats it like survival. Why? Because you're trying to control what's uncontrollable. Or maybe you're waiting for a text that never comes or a decision that's out of your hands, and you spiral into stories. What if they don't care? What if I failed? What if everything falls apart? In that moment, the problem isn't reality, it's resistance. The Stoics would say, you've stepped outside your domain. And that's when calm is lost. But imagine flipping that script. Imagine realizing that you only need to control one thing, your response. The traffic doesn't change, but your heartbeat slows. The waiting doesn't end, but your thoughts quiet. The uncertainty remains, but so does your peace. That shift, invisible to the world, is the moment a Stoic is born. The world still storms, but inside, there's stillness. Because calm isn't about removing storms. It's about learning to stand still in the rain. There's a story that Zeno used to tell his students. A man stood in the middle of the ocean, furious that the waves wouldn't stop. He cursed the wind, screamed at the sea, and exhausted himself fighting what would never obey him. Finally, he stopped, surrendered, and began to float. The ocean didn't change, but he did. Zeno would smile and say, "This is the secret of peace." And maybe, without knowing it, he was describing the same thing modern psychology calls cognitive reframing, changing how you interpret the world so the world loses its power over you. We live in an age where control feels like survival, control over our image, our plans, our outcomes. But the Stoics remind us, you can lose everything except your reasoned choice. The moment you surrender the need to control everything, paradoxically, you gain control of the only thing that matters, yourself. And that's the doorway to calm under any pressure. But we're not there yet, because there's something even deeper, a forgotten Stoic discipline that turns this awareness into unshakable composure. It's not just about acceptance or control. It's about transformation. The Stoics practiced a method so profound that modern neuroscience is only beginning to catch up. It's the foundation of every Stoic rule that will follow, the mental art of turning pain into peace. And that's where we go next.
Every philosophy sounds noble until life burns. Pain has a way of stripping away every illusion we hold about ourselves. It takes the quiet ideas we admire and comfort and drags them screaming into the chaos of reality. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They knew calm was not a gift, it was a discipline. They treated pressure not as an enemy, but as a blacksmith's forge, where the raw metal of the mind is beaten into something unbreakable. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "The blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." He wasn't being poetic, he meant it literally. Every insult, every loss, every fear was material for the inner fire. The stronger the flame, the brighter the calm. Imagine Marcus again, sleepless under the cold stars of the Danube frontier. Reports arrive of plague in Rome, rebellion in the legions, betrayal among his advisors. Any ordinary man would have shattered under that weight. But he wrote instead, "If it is endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining." Not because he was numb, but because he had trained the reflex to stay composed when others would drown in panic. His calm wasn't born that night, it was forged long before, through daily exercises that modern psychologists now call exposure and reframing. He rehearsed hardship every morning so that when hardship came, it found him already waiting. Seneca, too, trained for fire. In his letters to Lucilius, he described voluntary discomfort, sleeping on the floor, wearing rough clothes, eating simple food, not as punishment, but preparation. "Let us practice our minds," he said, "for what we may have to suffer." In today's world, we run from discomfort, anesthetize our anxiety with noise, screens, and endless distraction. The Stoics ran toward it because they knew the only way to command emotion is to face it directly. They called it premeditatio malorum, the rehearsal of adversity. Modern neuroscience calls it stress inoculation. It works on soldiers, athletes, leaders, and it worked on philosophers 2,000 years ago. Epictetus went further. He said the true test of philosophy is not when you sit safely in discussion, but when someone insults you, betrays you, or steals from you, and you remain still. He said, when something happens, the only thing in your power is your attitude towards it. He made peace not by escaping life, but by mastering its interpretation of it. Pain became information. Fear became signal. Emotion became a teacher. To him, nothing was wasted, not even suffering. And that, the Stoics believed, is how peace is born, by transforming every blow into wisdom. We, however, have forgotten this alchemy. We think peace is found in silence, meditation apps, vacations, or affirmations. But peace has never lived in comfort. It lives in confrontation. Calmness is not the absence of noise, it's the ability to remain centered within it. The Stoics trained themselves to find stillness in battle, reason in fear, love in loss. They practiced not escaping emotion, but observing it until it lost its grip. Marcus wrote, "You have within you something stronger than whatever happens to you." That sentence isn't motivational fluff, it's the manual for mental armor. Modern science now validates what they intuited. When we face stress deliberately, the brain rewires itself. The amygdala, our fear center, learns that not every alarm means danger. The prefrontal cortex grows stronger, regulating impulses and emotion. This is neuroplasticity in motion, the biological proof that Stoic training worked. Calm isn't passive, it's neurological mastery. And the Stoics, without microscopes or brain scans, had already mapped it through sheer observation of the human condition. But the most profound part of their practice wasn't intellectual, it was spiritual. They saw themselves as participants in a cosmic design. Whatever the universe sent, they accepted as both a challenge and a compliment, proof that the gods believed they could endure it. To live stoically was to cooperate with fate, not resist it. When life tested them, they whispered, "I was made for this." That single phrase turned chaos into command. Every hardship became a sacred rehearsal for the next. And this brings us to the threshold we've been circling since the beginning, the hidden foundation beneath all Stoic calm, the invisible discipline that made these men unshakable. You felt its presence in their stories, glimpsed its outline in their words. Now, in the next part, we step through that doorway, because in the next moment, for the first time, we'll name the first of the 5 Stoic rules, the rule that begins the transformation from ordinary reaction to unbreakable serenity.
Here it is, the first rule, the cornerstone upon which all Stoic calm is built. Control the inner frame. The Stoics believed that life itself is neutral. Events carry no meaning until the mind interprets them. The battlefield is never the world outside, it's the narrative inside. The moment you decide how to see something, you decide what power it has over you. Marcus Aurelius captured this perfectly. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. That's not denial, that's discipline at the level of perception. Think of the inner frame as the lens through which you interpret reality. Most people let the world hand them their frame. An insult arrives, they see offense. A setback happens, they see failure. But the Stoic flips the frame. An insult becomes feedback. A setback becomes fuel.
every event becomes material for mastery. This is what Epictetus meant when he said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Imagine a modern scene. Two athletes lose the same race. One curses fate, blames the weather, and spirals into self-pity. The other rewinds the moment, studies the tape, and says, "Good, now I know where to grow." The event was identical. The emotional outcome, entirely different. Why? Because the second athlete controlled the frame. The Stoics trained this power daily, reshaping their thoughts the way sculptors shape marble, until their reactions obeyed reason, not impulse. Seneca called this the art of mental redirection. He wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." When something threatened to disturb him, he paused, not to suppress emotion, but to inspect it. Why does this disturb me? What story am I telling myself about this? That pause, tiny yet profound, is where calm is born. Today, psychologists call this cognitive reframing. The Stoics discovered it 2 millennia ago. Epictetus trained his students with what we might now call thought drills. When insulted, they were to imagine the speaker as sick, like someone coughing, a symptom, not a personal attack. When fortune failed them, they were to picture the event as part of a vast play written by nature and themselves as actors fulfilling a noble role. He said, "Remember, you are an actor in a drama, of such kind as the author chooses." That mindset dissolved anger and restored perspective. The insult no longer pierced, the loss no longer crushed. And in modern neuroscience, we see the mechanism behind this ancient wisdom. When you reframe a stressful event, your brain's prefrontal cortex quiets the amygdala, the fear center. You literally rewrite your emotional response in real time. Calm, then, isn't mystical, it's mechanical. The Stoics were early neuroscientists of the soul. But don't mistake this rule for detachment. Controlling the inner frame doesn't mean feeling nothing. It means feeling with understanding. It's the difference between being in a storm and realizing you are the captain. You still feel the rain, but you no longer mistake it for drowning. That's what made the Stoics appear superhuman to others. Not that they lacked emotion, but that emotion never owned them. So practice begins like this. When chaos strikes, stop and ask, what frame am I choosing? Is this an obstacle or an opportunity to grow? Is this criticism or a mirror reflecting something I can improve? Every moment offers both stories, but you can only live one. The frame you choose becomes your fate. This first rule, control the inner frame, is the root of unshakable calm. Without it, all other rules collapse. With it, pressure becomes purpose. Marcus wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The moment you control the frame, even pain starts working for you. But there's more, because controlling the frame is only the beginning. The Stoics didn't stop at perception. They developed a second rule to reinforce it, a way to discipline the mind itself, so that control became automatic, effortless, and enduring. A rule so simple and yet so rarely mastered that it determines who thrives under pressure and who breaks. And that's where we go next.
The Stoics said that calm begins where time ends. Their second rule was simple yet absolute. Live inside the present moment. To them, anxiety was not a feeling, it was a time disorder. Worry pulls you into the future, regret drags you into the past, and both tear you away from the only place peace can exist, now. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." He understood that a mind scattered across timelines cannot stand firm under pressure. It's like trying to fight a battle while your army marches in 3 directions at once. When we lose the present, we lose proportion. A single problem multiplies into endless possibilities. What if this happens? What if I fail? What if they never forgive me? The Stoics called this fantasia, the tyranny of imagined outcomes. Seneca warned Lucilius, "We are tormented not by things, but by the opinions we have of things." The modern world calls it overthinking. The ancient world called it slavery of the mind. To live in the present, the Stoics practiced what we might call temporal discipline. Marcus began each morning reminding himself, "Let each thing you do, say, or intend be like that of a dying man." Not morbidly, but to focus. When you remember that each act might be your last, attention sharpens, trivial noise fades, and the mind becomes quiet. Epictetus trained his students to greet each moment as a separate lifetime. "Immediately make up your mind that the present is enough," he said. They weren't escaping time, they were mastering it. Imagine a modern equivalent, a surgeon mid-operation, instruments glinting beneath the sterile light. The room hums, the stakes are life itself. She cannot think of the next patient or the last mistake, only this incision, this heartbeat. Or a firefighter inside a collapsing building, smoke thick, alarms shrieking, yet every movement precise, deliberate. That's Stoic presence, complete absorption in the task at hand. Pressure dissolves because there's no space for it. There is only now. Neuroscience now confirms what they intuited. When the mind anchors in the present, activity in the amygdala, the fear center, drops. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought, strengthens. Attention becomes a shield. Psychologists call it flow state. Athletes call it the zone. The Stoics called it virtue in motion. For them, being present wasn't mystical, it was tactical. It was how they prevented emotions from hijacking reason. Seneca described it perfectly. True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future. Today, few people truly live that way. Our phones buzz, our minds drift, our peace fragments into notifications. We exist in 10 conversations at once, yet inhabit none. The Stoic path reverses that. They reclaimed life moment by moment, conversation by conversation, breath by breath. They didn't chase calm, they created it by choosing presence over projection. To practice this second rule, begin with awareness. When you catch your mind running ahead, pause. Feel your breath. Notice what is actually happening, not what might happen, not what should have happened, what is. Marcus advised, look within. Within is the fountain of good. Each time you return to the present, you drink from that fountain. Pressure weakens, not because the world slows down, but because your mind stops racing to meet it. The Stoics called this catalepsis, the grasp of reality as it is. Once you see clearly, the mind quiets. The moment becomes bearable, even beautiful, because in the present, everything is specific and manageable. Only in imagination does it become unbearable. That's why the Stoics trained presence like a muscle, daily, relentlessly, until it became instinct. Yet even presence isn't enough if the inner foundation remains fragile. The Stoics built something underneath it, a strength of will so resilient that no insult, loss, or chaos could shatter it. It is the third rule, the discipline of inner command, the ability to stand like a pillar while the storm rages. And that's where we go next.
The third rule of Stoic calm cuts deeper than all the rest. Command yourself before the world commands you. The Stoics believed that every battle is lost or won within the mind before it ever touches reality. You cannot lead your life, your choices, or your destiny until you first learn to lead your impulses. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That wasn't just a comfort, it was a commandment. For him, self-mastery wasn't optional, it was survival. The Roman world tested this truth brutally. Imagine Marcus, emperor of millions, seated on a golden throne knowing that one wrong word could ignite a rebellion, one sign of weakness could invite assassination. Around him, flattery, temptation, corruption. Inside him, a single vow: remain calm. He understood that the one who loses his temper, his discipline, or his focus surrenders his power to the world, and he refused. Even at the height of absolute authority, Marcus ruled only one kingdom completely: himself. Seneca called this imperium animi, the empire of the mind. He warned, "No man is free who is a slave to himself." Most people serve their moods, their cravings, their fears. They react before they think, speak before they reflect, and regret before they learn. The Stoic trains in reverse. He delays, he observes, he commands. His words follow reason, not rage. His choices follow purpose, not impulse. The Stoic's calm isn't passive, it's deliberate restraint, the quiet strength of a mind that refuses to kneel to emotion. In modern terms, this rule is emotional regulation, the most underrated superpower of the human brain. Neuroscientists tell us that between stimulus and response lies a fraction of a second where the prefrontal cortex can override the amygdala, stopping emotional reflexes before they explode. The Stoics lived in that fraction. Epictetus taught his students to pause before reacting, to insert reason into that gap. "When you are offended at any man's fault," he said, "turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger." That single pause, the moment you choose awareness over reaction, is the moment you reclaim control. Think of a soldier under fire, bullets slicing the air. Panic is natural, but training takes over. Breath steadies, vision narrows, focus sharpens. That's Stoicism in motion. Control so ingrained, it becomes instinct. Or picture a CEO under crisis, headlines crashing, investors demanding answers. The room panics, she stays composed, speaks slowly, sees clearly. That calm isn't charisma, it's discipline, practiced over years, rule by rule, thought by thought. The world sees confidence, inside it's command. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Most of that waste comes from emotional chaos, moments lost to anger, envy, anxiety. The Stoic eliminates that waste by governing his energy. He chooses what deserves reaction and what doesn't. The insult, silence. The delay, patience. The failure, study. This isn't suppression, it's transformation. The emotion still arises, but it finds no fuel. The fire burns out before it spreads. And when emotion is mastered, calm becomes power. Not the weak kind of calm that retreats from life, but the calm that steps forward unflinching because it knows itself. The Stoic doesn't need control over the crowd, the market, or the weather. He controls the one thing all those forces can never touch: his inner command center. This is why Marcus could face treason without rage, why Epictetus could endure slavery without despair. They ruled themselves so completely that no one else could rule them. But the Stoics went even further. They didn't just command their emotions, they turned that command into clarity. The fourth rule they lived by transformed self-mastery into strategy, the ability to see order inside chaos, to remain rational while the world panics. It is the secret discipline behind Stoic leadership and resilience, the calm that not only survives storms, but uses them to navigate.
The fourth Stoic rule is the discipline that separates the wise from the weary. Turn chaos into clarity. To the Stoics, chaos wasn't a threat, it was a teacher disguised as turmoil. They believed the mind's calm isn't proven in silence, but in noise. Anyone can meditate in a quiet room. The Stoic keeps composure when the world burns.
As Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Those words weren't poetic comfort, they were his battle plan, forged amid war, betrayal, and plague. Imagine him writing those lines in a dim tent on the northern frontier. The empire stretched thin, enemies rising on every border, generals plotting behind his back. Every advisor urged him to despair. Instead, Marcus picked up his pen and turned chaos into a lesson. Each problem became raw material for virtue. Fear became courage, delay became patience, betrayal became wisdom. He didn't pray for calm skies, he built sails for the storm. The Stoics saw life as the forge of the soul. Seneca said, "Fire tests gold, adversity tests brave men." To them, pressure wasn't punishment, it was purification. The harder the life, the greater the chance to practice wisdom. When others collapsed, the Stoic leaned forward and whispered, "This is my training." The same way an athlete trains with weights, the Stoic trains with problems. And the weight that crushes others strengthens him. Modern psychology now echoes what they lived by: cognitive reframing, the ability to reinterpret adversity so that it serves growth instead of destruction. Neuroscientists found that people who frame stress as a challenge, not a threat, show lower cortisol levels, faster recovery, and higher resilience. The Stoics did this instinctively. When Seneca's exile stripped him of wealth, he wrote his finest works. When Epictetus lost his freedom, he found philosophy. They didn't escape chaos, they transmuted it into insight. Picture a modern Stoic. Her startup collapses, her relationships fail, her plans crumble. Most would spiral into despair. She pauses, breathes, and asks, "What is this teaching me that comfort never could?" That single question transforms everything. Chaos no longer owns her, it educates her. Like a sculptor who sees beauty hidden in broken marble, she shapes her piece from disorder. The Stoic doesn't wish for an easy life, only for a strong mind. Epictetus compared life to a ship sailing through storms. "You cannot calm the sea," he said, "but you can adjust your sails." The wise captain studies the wind, not curses it. He learns to move with the current, not against it. That's Stoic clarity. The art of seeing what can be controlled, what must be accepted, and what must be endured. In that vision lies freedom. Anxiety fades because chaos stops being an enemy and becomes information. Cleontes, the successor of Zeno, said, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." The Stoic chooses to be led, willingly, intelligently, through the flow of events. He doesn't fight reality, he shapes his choices within it. The modern world could call this mental agility, resilience, or adaptability. The Stoics simply called it wisdom. When you stop resisting chaos, you start understanding it. And in understanding, calm is born. But clarity alone doesn't complete the Stoics' transformation. There is one more rule, the crown of all Stoic teaching, a rule so profound it unites every discipline before it. Presence, command, and clarity all dissolve into something eternal. It's not about surviving pressure, but transcending it. The fifth and final rule reveals why the Stoics' calm is not fragile peace, but invincible serenity, the kind that remains even when everything else is lost. By now, the Stoic path begins to take shape: perception, presence, command, clarity. 4 pillars holding the mind upright against the storm. Yet even these pillars tremble before the final test of life. When pressure becomes pain, when control collapses, when nothing remains but the naked soul. The Stoics called this moment the true battlefield, not when the world attacks you, but when it abandons you. What you do then defines who you are. Seneca once wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself."
To the Stoics, pressure was not the enemy, it was initiation. Each hardship stripped away illusion until only truth remained. And in that truth, a quiet strength was born. Marcus Aurelius, weary and sick during his last campaign, knew he was dying. Yet he wrote, "If it is endurable, endure it. If it is not, it is brief." Those words were not theory. They were his farewell. Even as his body broke, his mind stood unshaken. That's when Stoicism stops being philosophy and becomes immortality. There's a story, not ancient but modern. A man loses his business, his marriage, his home. Everything collapses. For weeks he hides from the world, drowning in self-pity and noise. Then one day, while sitting in the wreckage of what was once his office, he finds an old notebook where he had written a quote months before. "You have power over your mind, not outside events." The words sting. He closes his eyes, breathes, and repeats it aloud. For the first time, he feels the truth. The world can strip everything but not the ability to respond. That moment, he stops being a victim. He begins again, calmer, clearer, freer. That's the transformation the Stoics promised. Not a life without storms, but the ability to stand unmoved within them. Every rule so far points to this transformation. The first teaches us to see differently. The second anchors us in the present. The third makes us masters of ourselves. The fourth trains us to find order inside chaos. But something still remains, something higher. Because even if you master your emotions, live in the present, and think with clarity, there will still come a day when life breaks you in ways you cannot predict or prevent. The Stoics faced this truth without illusion. They knew no rule, no wisdom, no technique can fully protect a human heart from loss, grief, or mortality. What they discovered next wasn't control, it was transcendence. Epictetus said, "Do not seek for events to happen as you wish, but wish for events to happen as they do, and your life will flow well." In those words hides the final secret, the ultimate Stoic rule that dissolves the boundary between resistance and peace. It is the rule that allowed slaves to feel free, emperors to feel humble, and warriors to die calm. It's the truth that the modern world still runs from, that peace isn't found in control, but in surrender to what is eternal and unshakable within you. Marcus called it the inner citadel, the part of you that no pain can reach, no loss can break. The final rule is the key to that citadel, but to enter it, you must let go of everything the world taught you about success, failure, and even calm itself. Because what the Stoics found beyond calm was something far greater, a stillness untouched by pressure or time. And in the final rule, that stillness will be revealed.
This is the moment the Stoic journey ends, or perhaps where it truly begins. The fifth and final rule is the one that turns wisdom into serenity. Surrender to what you can't control, and you become untouchable. Every other rule prepares you for this one. You've learned to see clearly, live presently, command yourself, and turn chaos into clarity. But the final lesson is acceptance, the deepest act of strength. The Stoics called it amor fati, the love of fate. Not resignation, not defeat, but the fierce embrace of reality as it is. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." To surrender like this is to stop fighting the world and start illuminating it. The untrained mind spends its life in resistance. It argues with the past, fears the future, and curses the present. But resistance is exhaustion disguised as effort. The Stoic sees the futility in that war and lays down his arms. He doesn't give up, he gives in, intelligently, to the rhythm of life itself. Seneca told his students, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." The Stoic chooses to walk willingly. In that choice, he becomes free. Epictetus, once a slave, found this rule not in books, but in chains. When his master twisted his leg until it broke, he simply said, "You will break it." And when it snapped, he added calmly, "Did I not tell you so?" To the world, that's madness. To Stoics, it's mastery. His body was controlled. His mind never was. He had discovered the highest form of freedom, the power to decide that no external force can decide who you are inside. That's what surrender means in Stoicism. Not to bow, but to transcend. The modern world confuses control with strength, but real strength is letting go of control without losing composure. Life will take things from you, people, plans, peace, but it can't take your response. And in that gap between what happens and how you react, eternity lives. That's where calm becomes indestructible. Marcus called this place the inner citadel. He said, "Look well into yourself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if you will always look. When pressure mounts, when the world burns, when your plans collapse, the Stoic returns there, within." He doesn't hide from the storm. He realizes he is not the storm. Modern psychology calls this radical acceptance, but the Stoics knew it centuries ago. Peace begins the moment you stop demanding that life be different. You stop chasing "why me?" and start asking, "what now?" The universe ceases to be an opponent and becomes your ally. Every event, good or bad, becomes raw material for growth. Every setback becomes a lesson. Every ending becomes transformation. When you surrender, pressure loses its power. The chaos that once ruled you becomes silence. You stand at the center of life's noise, completely still. Like Marcus, writing in his tent amid war, like Epictetus, teaching freedom in chains, like Seneca, accepting death with calm resolve. They all lived differently, but they died the same way, at peace with what they could not change. That is the Stoics' immortality. So the 5 rules come full circle. See clearly, live presently, command yourself, turn chaos into clarity, and surrender to what you can't control. Together, they forge a calm that cannot be stolen, a calm born not from avoidance, but from alignment with reality. The Stoic does not escape pressure, he transforms within it. He walks through life as a silent flame, warm, steady, unbothered by the wind. The storms will still come. The world will still shake. But when they do, remember this: calm isn't the absence of pressure, it's the presence of power. And that power has always been yours. You only needed to remember where to look.